Big thanks to the Small Business Development Center for sponsoring The Vault at 201 North Broadway. The SBDC is an incredible resource for small business owners, offering free one-on-one counseling, business plan support, market research, financial projections, and much more. Whether you're just starting out or looking to grow, they're here to help your business succeed. Reach out to us at bigsky.economicdevelopment.org.
Somebody asked me years ago what I do, and I think that what we do at the museum is make people feel more at home. We take people, give them the maps of the past to get them to the present. You know, you get to know your town better. You feel more at home.
The following is a Big Sky Economic Development production.
It's Mars B.
And Kavo.
And this is The Vault at 201 North Broadway.
A business podcast
where we bring you entrepreneurs, small business owners, and community leaders of Montana.
You don't want to miss this.
Learn how to better start, manage, and grow your business.
And your leadership style.
Tangible takeaways to save you time and improve whatever it is that you're working on.
You're listening to The Vault.
Hi, everyone. This is Steve Arviskow, Executive Director for Big Sky Economic Development. Today's podcast was recorded August 14th of 2024, and it features Kevin Kooistra, Executive Director, Western Heritage Center. Kevin passed away December 16th of 2024. Kevin was a featured speaker at our annual meeting just this past October of 2024, October 3rd, and he shared with an audience of 300 business leaders in our community such a powerful message about the importance of business leaders not only growing their own business, but taking on the responsibility of growing the community. Kevin that day shared with us a very strong quote from the turn of the century, 1914, that was a statement in a letter written by John D. Loskamp, a Billings business leader at the time. Mr. Loskamp shared this in his letter. This is the day of your opportunity and responsibility. It will never come again. To be living in this age is sublime, but to be living after we have gone to our reward is most sublime. This we can achieve by building for those who come after us and blazing the path for future generations who shall take up our work. Kevin, colleague of all of ours, shared this message, but he also lived this message as a calling, blazing a path for future generations. With the permission of Kevin's family, we are honored to share this episode number 79 of The Vault in Kevin Kooistra's memory.
Today joining us on The Vault is Kevin Kooistra, the Executive Director of the Western Heritage Center. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here today.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you, Marcel.
Yeah, and we're missing our co-host Kayla. She's off on a training, so normally she joins me, my partner in crime, but we're soloing it today. So Kevin, you're the first historian we've had on The Vault. So it's thrilling to have you.
You're in trouble because you know the reputation of historians and microphones.
I don't know.
Oh, they like them.
Yeah, well, because you have a lot to say, lots of things to say. But we actually, before we get into Billings things, I would love to get into Kevin's story. And where did Kevin grow up? And what brought Kevin to Montana?
Okay.
Let's go way back.
Yeah, let's go back. I actually grew up in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey.
Okay.
I was born in Patterson, but I was raised in Bergen County, which is about maybe 10, 15 miles from New York City.
Oh, wow.
So I could see New York City skyline from my backyard. And,
wow.
So, suburban kid out of North Jersey. And, I got the Western fever. I was living in Michigan at the time. And
so did you graduate from Jersey?
I did. I graduated from Midland Park High School in 1979.
Okay.
And had gotten an opportunity to go to a college, a very evangelical college in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Calvin College. It didn't work out for me, and I was kind of staggered and living in Grand Rapids, Michigan, unsure of what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who I had become friends with during college, she's like, you shouldn't check out Yellowstone. And I was like, Yellowstone? She goes, yeah, you can get jobs in the national parks. And I knew nothing about Yellowstone. So I applied. I think the first time I got turned down because of the season, I still wasn't committed to moving out west.
Yeah.
I thought I'd just come out for a couple months, like work at Old
seasonal
Faithful.
work. Yeah.
And I got turned down, and my friend Ruth, said, maybe just apply for a longer season. So I think I applied for something like from, April 15, when the parks first opens, through the end of September, and I got accepted. So I came out to the American West first time, landed, flew a plane from Grand Rapids to Bozeman. First impression, I was frightened by the mountains.
You were scared.
Yeah, I had never seen mountains like that. I grew up in the East and grew up camping and all the time camping and outdoors and in the woods, and all of a sudden to have these staggering, now I look at the Bridgers and I'm like, they're nice, but they're not like, the Missions or the Tetons and stuff. But I landed in Bozeman, hitchhiked from Bozeman to Gardner.
Wait, hitchhiked? That's like you literally hitchhiked.
Yeah, I didn't have a car or anything like that, so I grabbed what gear. I had like a backpack with all my gear and stuff like that. I didn't carry much with me. And so I hitchhiked from Bozeman to Gardner. And one of the first conversations I had with a person from Montana was I still had probably a little bit of a New Jersey accent, which I don't think I have much anymore.
Yeah, I was like, you don't really have much of an
Now, there's certain words, my brother Paul, my dog, my coffee. There's certain little things where I put a W in for some reason.
Just to make it sound cooler.
I guess it makes me sound cooler. I don't know. But anyway, I got into Gardner, and I walked up to these three cowboys. They were wearing cowboy hats, so I assumed they were cowboys. Yeah. And the first thing I said is I did not know that we had gazelles in North America, because I had seen some pronghorn. I didn't know what they were. And the guy looked at me and he said, "You're drinking with us tonight." So my first night in Montana was at the Two-Bit Saloon with these three cowboys drinking pitchers of beer. I got, a little tipsy. I wasn't used to the elevation and stuff.
Plus, they probably are seasoned.
Yes, and they were also having fun with me because there was a rabbit with horns mounted on the behind the bar, and they were telling me about this jackalope. And I was like, I can't believe this thing exists, right? And I was
like, what are you people doing out here in the West?
I know. And then after we had a few beers, it was pretty late. It was like 10 o'clock at night or something. It was dark. They had a plastic bag, and they found a stick. And then we were going to go snipe hunting. Okay. Are you familiar with snipe hunting? Kind of.
Yes, I'm familiar with what was happened to you.
Yes. So anyway, the way they explained it to me is you took the bag and you hit the stick, gently on the side of the bag, and you said the word snipe, snipe. The birds were so stupid, they would jump into the bag. And I was like, this is awesome. I was so excited.
You Montanans are crazy.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm seeing animals I'd never seen before. I'm doing this.
A bunny with horns.
I'm going in with this snipe hunting. And then I think they felt sorry for me. So they basically said, buddy, we're just kidding.
I know, because they already got you on the jackalope.
Oh, yeah. And they already knew I didn't know what a pronghorn was. Yeah. So
you couldn't just Google it.
Oh, yeah. So, the whole experience in those first 12 hours were amazing. And then I ended up.
How wild, though. Like, that's you're in Montana, and that's your Montana story, out of the gate.
Well, then I had a sleeping bag because I'd grown up camping my whole life. And so I walked up the old road, where the entry point is at Gardner, and you can go up. Now the old road is the road.
Yep, with the arch.
Yep, it's the road that they rebuilt after the flood. And but anyway, at the time it was just gravel, so I walked up that road, and it was late at night. I'd never seen stars like that in my life. Never, the Milky Way is like you don't even see it back east. So
the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, it's insane,
mind blowing. And so I remember putting my sleeping bag down. I was on the side of the road, and I kind of, was nervous, and I laid down in a little hollow of grass and stuff like that. And I just put my sleeping bag out, and it's 11 at night or whatever, and I heard a coyote. Now, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I thought it was a wolf. And there were no wolves in 1980 in Yellowstone. So anyway, I remember in my sleeping bag praying, dear Lord, may the wolves and the bears not eat me.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't even know if, bears would have been out in mid-April, but
You never know.
and then I was frozen pretty much that night. But on the way out, I actually walked out.
And you slept on the ground.
I slept on the ground, yeah. And then on the way out, I found an elk rack, huge. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
It was antlers of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like waltzing through the front entrance of Yellowstone, carrying this elk rack, as proud as a peacock. Like, look what I have. I had
Look at what I found. I don't even know what it is.
I had no idea. Like, I was breaking the law, and I apologize. And the guy who had picked me up hitchhiking in Paradise Valley,
yeah,
I saw him. He was apparently working for the Park Service at the time. It was really early. It was like 6 a.m. The light was just coming up, and I had this giant antler of some sort. And I saw him, and I said, thanks for picking me up yesterday. Would you like this antler? And he said like something offhand, like, did anybody see you do this? And I'm like, I didn't understand even the question. I was like, no, I don't think so, because it's obviously first break of light. And anyway, he took it, and that's like my first, not even 24 hours in the park.
No, you've already had like a wild
and ever since then,
arrival.
Absolutely. Ever since I've had that experience, I've always felt kind of drawn to Yellowstone.
Yeah.
I mean, even today, I think I've gone to the park like 5 times in the last 8 months.
Oh, wow.
Just because there's no place like it,
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes when you're an outsider going in,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very different experience, I mean, like I said, I always grew up hiking, camping, exploring, swimming, boating.
Mm-hmm.
And now the playground had just expanded by 1,000. The mountains were bigger,
Uh-huh.
the lakes were colder,
Different
animals,
wildlife.
the wildlife was just amazing, to see, to experience. And that was like my first period. Now, my job.
Yeah, tell me about the job.
I was started out. I moved up very quickly in the corporate ranks. I started from pot washer.
Wow.
To dishwasher, to pantry, to busboy, to wine steward, to waiter in that year.
Wow, so really quick in those like few months. And where were you housed? Did they house you?
Yeah, so it was, I can't remember who we worked for, if it was TW or whatever, but I was at Old Faithful for the whole time. Okay,
wow.
So here's the crazy thing is, so you heard my first 24 hours. I can't remember when Mount St. Helens went off, May, right? Of 1980.
I can't remember either.
I'm only there for a couple weeks or a few weeks, and all of a sudden it's raining ash from the sky, and people are wearing masks.
This place.
Yeah, and then on June 1st of that year, I believe it was June 1st, right after that, they had like a 24-inch snowstorm in Yellowstone in like what I would consider the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Yeah,
I was like, what is this place all about? So it was mystifying to me that initially everything that was going on. And I still have empathy for people who make mistakes. People who go in the park, do something dumb, you know what I mean? Because I did a lot.
Pet an animal.
I'd have a hard time picking up a wounded bison and bringing it into my car. Of course, I wouldn't do that. But those kind of things, like going off trail.
Yeah, you're just curious.
You're just not, and I've been to the park.
Or like the antlers, like you're like, why can't I pick it up? And then you're like, oh.
Now I'm at the point where I'm at like Pebble Creek. I love that area in the Lamar Valley where I'm like, no, you can't take that rock.
Put it back.
That little rock, that goes back. So I tend to photograph whatever I find. Like I have found some fossils up in the Lamar Valley. I just photographed it in my hand, post it on Facebook. Everybody gets joy out of that, right? So,
and then you put it back.
And there it sits, so yeah. So people who make those mistakes, there's so much to talk about just in terms of Yellowstone, how people's perspectives of natural world alter from one person to the next. But I was in the park. Then I got the park fever.
So did you stay? Like, so you were there, by the time that towards the end of the summer, you're a waiter. Like, then what? Did you stay in the park?
A friend of mine, I had friends in California, so we hitchhiked to Berkeley, California. And then we hitchhiked from Berkeley up to Seattle to see a friend of mine and back to Berkeley. I lived in Berkeley for just a short time, not as a student, just as I was actually doing something I had never heard of either, which was an espresso bar.
Okay.
I was what do you call that?
Like a barista.
A barista. That's what I was.
Okay.
Yeah. So even the owner of the coffee place was even a Frenchman.
Ooh.
So I was like in a totally different world. But I was there for a little while.
From one extreme to the next.
Yes, I went from. So then I went to the Grand Canyon. I lived at the Grand Canyon for a little while. Lived at Rocky Mountain National Park for a while.
Wow.
Kind of just
So
got
these
into
natural parks.
I got into the
national
circuit and
parks.
stuff like that. Hitchhiked all around the country. Ended up hitchhiking down all the way to Florida and New Orleans. So I did that for about 2 years, and then I realized that was probably not a direction to stake a claim in your life. So then I ended up going back to college. So I eventually went to school at Bozeman because I knew
Because you liked Yellowstone.
Yes,
or Montana.
really, actually, yes. I mean, when you love a place, you try to figure out how to get back, right? And so I'm back east again. I'm living in Atlantic City, that area. And I loved living by the ocean. I loved the Jersey Shore. I loved, getting up in the mornings and wrapping a towel over my shoulders and walking, 6 blocks to the beach. But there was something about the American West and the mountains and, the beauty. And so I was like, what can I do out west? I mean, I don't want to just go back and be a pot washer again. So I just thought, I can go to college. So I had saved up enough money working in casinos to pay for out-of-state tuition for like 2 semesters. And I had bought a brand new truck. So it was kind of an anomaly for New Jersey. I was driving
You
a
don't have to
pickup
hitchhike
truck.
anymore, which is like crazy to me anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, so I came back out and went to school at Bozeman. So that's how I really kind of settled into this area.
So tell me about college and at that time. Like, what was Bozeman like? What were you going to school for? Like, knowing you're like, okay, I saved up for like 2 semesters.
Yeah.
Did you just go for gen eds, or were you drawn towards a type of programming?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think initially I was interested in like field biology.
Okay.
I've always been intrigued by the outdoor and the natural world and stuff. And I had a class like in statistics and field biology at the same time, and I struggled in both. And then I took courses in anthropology, which I loved, and it just seemed to resonate with me. The
Like you
whole
got
idea, I got it. Like we're all on this together. We all have differences. Let's learn about those things and not be so judgmental, that type of thing. So I was fortunate. I have a wonderful professor at Bozeman, Dr. Larry Carucci, who has just graduated from the University of Chicago. He was a hard ass too. Boy, he was really hard. And he demanded his students work really hard. And I loved him and I hated him at the same time, kind of thing.
Love, hate.
Because I knew I was getting something out of it. And at the same time, I had other professors like Tom Roll and Les Davis who were in the archaeology department. And I ended up starting to do field work with those guys.
Wow.
So I got, just such a unique perspective on Montana because, like, for example, with Dr. Davis's crews, we did archaeological excavations on the Missouri River at Eagle Creek, at Lost Terrace. So we would live on the river bottom for like 3-4 weeks at a time in tents and then work, 6 days a week. And if it rained, we couldn't get out for a week. Out of the canyon and stuff like that. I actually ended up having an opportunity to work at the Schmidt Quarry site outside of Three Forks.
Oh, wow.
The Barton Gulch site, which is on the Ruby Reservoir. So I knew, you spend 3 or 4 weeks in a place.
You've probably seen a lot of Montana that even people that grew up here haven't seen.
Well, and I think that's part of my quest at this point. I just love Montana. I love small town Montana. I love exploring. And I think, being an archaeologist puts you in these community. So like going to Big Sandy was a huge deal for us because that would be that maybe once every 2 weeks or something, or once a week, we would get out of the camp area and go into Big Sandy and like get a shower and go to a bar. I remember
Clean up, go out.
Yeah. Oh, I remember going to Big Sandy and we were like talking to some kids. We were sitting, it was like probably 10, maybe 12 archaeologists, nine guys, 3 women, something of that ratio. And we were like talking to these kids and all of a sudden like, I don't know what time it was. It was like 9 o'clock. I think it was still light out. And the siren went off. And we were like, what's that? And the kids ran away.
Curfew.
That's right. I didn't even know that existed.
We had one. Yeah.
Right.
And I think it was like 10 o'clock, but during the school year.
You might still have it.
I think they still probably do.
In Ekalaka, so one of my favorite towns, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of things to discover. Of course, when an archaeological crew shows up in a small town like Big Sandy or Alder, Montana.
Wow.
People are like, oh, are they like custom cutters?
Yeah.
You
Are
see,
they here to cut weed? What's going on?
You're like, even when you're doing the work and people would pull off the Missouri River and like see what we're doing. And I remember some guy said, "Are you doing like a grasshopper count?" Because we would have these 2 meter by 2 meter holes in the ground, and grasshoppers inevitably would be jumping in with us, and they thought we were like biologists or something, So, but the archaeology was interesting in itself, but it was more the experience of being with a group of people in a very isolated situation for 3 to 4 weeks and figuring out how to get along with everybody.
Wow.
Because if you didn't, you were
It's
miserable.
Yep.
So you were forced to, just enjoy the work as much as you can and complain about it because it was terrible, hard work.
But it's like I feel like when you do that with a group, it's like camaraderie because it's like a shared experience of good and bad, but it's like a shared experience with each other.
Yeah, it could be shared misery.
I think there's a lot of growth that happens in those situations.
Yes. I just remember we were getting so comfortable. We would have volunteers come out and work on some of our archaeological projects. And it was always so interesting because we could never complain about our salary then because they were volunteers. And they would always be so happy because they were experiencing also something really unique. But I do remember like every full moon or something, we would have a party. I'm not a drinker at all anymore. I haven't been for a long time. But at the time, we'd have a bottle of Jack Daniels and 12 or so of us would be like howling at the moon, and the volunteers would be looking at us out of the side of their eye going, holy crap,
people,
right?
These students from MSU.
It was a great experience. I did that for several years.
And was that was through MSU?
Initially through college, but when I graduated, I continued to work as an archaeologist.
And so did you graduate as an archaeologist?
I graduated with a sociology degree with an emphasis on anthropology.
Okay.
So I took almost every anthropology class that they offered at the university. For example, when I worked with Larry Carucci, he taught more social, cultural anthropology, but he didn't feel as comfortable maybe, with physical anthropology, which is the study of evolution and stuff. So I would help as a TA on those.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? So what I liked about anthropology is not only the social, cultural aspects and understanding linguistics and why we speak like we do, but also the physical biology of it, the evolution, the development, our relationship with other creatures on the planet. I found it just really invigorating. I still think like that. I told Cruzado, I think, I said, Larry Carucci, he'll love this if he's listening.
Yeah.
It changed the way I think.
Wow.
Have a professor who
so impactful in your life.
Who works with you and is patient with you and challenges you constantly over time. If it's something that's already kind of in you, I think a lot of times we step into things that we find some comfort in, and we kind of get going in that direction. Whether you're an engineer or a computer scientist, there's something that probably clicks. That's right. Something that you feel comfortable. And for some reason, that discipline really resonated with me, and it did change the way I think about the world and see the world. So after graduating from Bozeman, I continued to do archaeology. I actually worked in what's called the Greenbelt line out of Washington, D.C. They were expanding this subway line to go up to Greenbelt, which is now there. So we did archaeology there. I did archaeology in up at the Springfield Hartford Airport, the Bradley International Airport. We did archaeology there. Ended up doing archaeology in North Dakota, teepee ring excavations and areas. A lot of times these sites were what would be called salvage work. So, for example, Eagle Creek is a good example. Maybe the North Dakota site in Beulah. The mine was expanding, or the river was eroding the cut bank, or they were going to expand the airport or the subway line. Well, So they're having an archaeological crew go in for 3 to 4 weeks or something, 6 weeks, and then do excavations to learn what they can before they come in with the big equipment and kind of alter the whole landscape. So I did that for several years. And
with that, because I'm not as familiar, so are you finding like what kinds of things are you finding? Are you finding like Native American artifacts, dinosaur artifacts?
That's a great question. Anthropology focuses on humans. So where paleontology does dinosaurs, more ancient fossils. Now,
would you find some of it?
Yeah, we would do, of course, dinosaurs is 66 million years ago, so that's way out of our reach. So we're looking at human occupation. So, for example, at the Barton Gulch site, which was 9,300 years old.
And that's in north.
That's in right by the Ruby Reservoir in the Alder, Virginia City area.
Oh, okay.
And in that site, 9,300 years old is amazingly old. Occupation site, campsites. You could see the teepee ring,
especially in Montana.
Yeah. You could see the fire pits. We found some bone from a dire wolf, which was an extinct wolf. You know, and humans and the big megafauna like mammoth, mastodons, saber-toothed tigers. They actually overlap for a period of time.
Wow.
In North America, so you could potentially find a projectile point sticking out of a mammoth bone, kind of thing. So. All human-related stuff. So, like on the Missouri River, on the Eagle Creek, I think we found an incredible amount of projectile points, small, like transitional points, getting to where the bow and arrow is coming in. Mm-hmm. So they used to throw the arrows, in a sense, off of a board called an atlatl board.
Interesting.
And it would the Aztecs were still doing it when Spanish were moving in. They saw atlatls being used.
Okay, I'm gonna look
but
that
the
up
bow and
later.
arrow is more like 1,000 to 1,200 years ago where that comes into play. And of course, that's a more refined technique, more controlled and stuff. So you would find projectile points based on the technology.
Wow.
Spear points are larger. Atlatl dart points are more medium. The smallest points would be something you would find off a bow and arrow. So the Eagle Creek site, we were finding like a transitional point, but we found like projectile points or arrowheads sticking out of antelope bones, pronghorn.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And, the idea was it was like a pronghorn antelope processing site, that they would somehow maybe trap the animals as they were coming on the ice on the river, corral them, take them. The whole site was just littered with human human evidence. We never found human bones there, but we found the antelopes, that they were hunting, the tools they left behind.
Mm-hmm.
At Eagle Creek, there was actually if I remember this correctly, there was a pile of river cobbles. Then there was a fire pit where you could see the rings of oxidation in where they were taking from a fire pit. They would throw the cobbles into a fire, heat the rocks up, and then throw the rocks in a boiling pit. And they were all right there, 1, 2, 3.
Like a work zone that you
like
found.
A workstation.
And then you could figure out like what they were doing based off of what you find.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was really, really cool, And like I said, the work was so hard. You're out in the sun, all day. I just remember at Eagle Creek one time, my friends Matt and Catherine came, and I had dug a pit like 2 meters by 2 meters, or about 6 feet by whatever, and the pit was already almost 5 feet deep. So think about if it's like 95 degrees out, and you're baking your own bake oven basically.
Yep.
And I remember like Matt and Catherine.
Minimal breeze.
Yes, minimal. Matt and Catherine were sitting on lawn chairs in the shade, and they said, "How's it going?" And I kind of popped my head up, and just at that moment, the wind blew and like dust blew in my face, and I'm at ground level.
You're like, "This is great,
yeah,
thank you."
Yeah, and they were like, and I'm like
dirt.
looking over them with their iced teas in the shade, like, "Damn it, what am I doing here?"
Why am I stuck in this hole?
But like I said, the people that you work with, you do, just like you mentioned, you have that certain camaraderie. Mm-hmm. I always found it interesting too that a lot of the people who did archaeology on our cruise were veterans.
Oh wow!
Because that sense of discipline. Get up at 6:30. Your breakfast would be served in the big mess tent at 7:30. You'd be out on the crew at 8 o'clock. Get a break at 10 for 15 minutes. Lunch would be served in the mess tent. It was very
routine,
very regimented, and very, very routine. Except after work, when the work was all done and you were done eating at 6 o'clock or whatever, 6:30, then you could explore.
Mm-hmm.
So like near Eagle Creek, I believe it is like Neat Coulee. It's just really neat.
Yeah.
These little slot canyons. So you could be able to spend time in a place, and that's true for wherever I was at. Like in Townsend, I was at the Indian Creek site, and we would go downtown to the bar and like shoot pool and
be in the small town bar, which feels different.
Absolutely, so people would get to know us over time because we were at Barton Gulch for like 3 years in a row.
They would totally know you by then. They're like, that's the crew of X. And
and they were like friends. The people of Alder were always like, they're really cool people, really salt of the earth, kind of grounded people. And I think they appreciated how, looking at what we did,
Mm-hmm.
the hard work that was involved and stuff like that. So,
Well, and you're preserving their history of their town too by finding those things, and you're finding those things. And I
Absolutely.
just think that, you're in the town for so many years or weeks or whatever it is, and they really start to form a bond too. I bet.
Yeah, and they would always be helpful too. I remember in Alder, there was a Chick's Bar, I think it is called, and somebody was like, "Oh God, we should get a backhoe and take that other section off," because we knew exactly what level we had to get to, because we would do test pits.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, at Alder, at the Barton Gulch site, we had to go down, I'm guessing, like 14 feet.
Wow.
The site was exposed in a cut bank that some miners find. So
how do you hand dig it like normally?
Well, in that instance, we did like a test pit, which we dug a 6x6 foot or 2 meter by 2 meter pit. And then we would go down quite a ways. It was, you could get dangerous in some ways because you'd be like 8-9 feet deep. And you're looking you're looking at the interior profile, and then you're pulling out stuff out of either the cut bank and you're testing it to see what the date would be. So in the particular site at Barton Gulch, they found these projectile points that were quite long, like spear points, and the miners found them. So the miners then went up to the college and said, "We found these incredibly weird spear points at this cut bank coming out on the ground." And so the professor Davis went back with like Steve Alberg and figured out what bands that had charcoal in them, tested them, found a date for one of them that said 9,300 years old, estimated by looking at the spear points, we might be looking at that period.
Wow.
We did a test pit, and then we would go back and we'd get a front-end loader, and pull the soil back from the edge of the cut bank back.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be our workspace, and we would take it down like to within a foot of the 9,300-year-old site level. And sure enough, within the first few days, we had already found a couple of those same projectile points on the ground level, next to a fire pit, next to bones, things like that. Really crazy stuff.
That's crazy.
So,
but like so cool and unique. And so you did that for a while, and then did you stay in the Bozeman area?
No, I actually, people who've done archaeology their whole life, that's hard work.
Yeah.
Blistering hot sun, all of that, seasonal work. I actually really always felt like my true engagement was with living people. So I went to Northern Arizona University for grad school, and I made a shift toward cultural anthropology, which is working with living people, obviously.
Not finding them.
Yes, not finding their remains in the ground, to actually work. And of course, the disciplines tie together, because obviously a lot of the suppositions you make about, how did they live 9,000 years ago, are looking at potentially, hunting, gathering peoples, in Central Africa from the early 1900s. You're making a big leap, because obviously humans change, and we've changed over time. So I went and got a degree in what's called applied anthropology. The idea was that I would be able to work for the National Park Service, or, some people would leave the country and do, work with, Australians, or work with Romanians, or whatever, what I mean? You could go anywhere, because basically people are people. And then, it just depends on how welcome you were in a community or something. So then I got a degree in applied anthropology, and shockingly, I got the degree and almost immediately got work. So
in Arizona?
No, I actually got hired here in Billings by a group called Ethnoscience, and Ken and Sherry Deaver ran Ethnoscience.
And were you looking back at Montana when you applied? Or were you kind of just applying all over?
I think Sherry must have. I had worked for Ken as an archaeologist previous in North Dakota, so they knew who I was. They knew I was getting a degree in applied anthropology, and Sherry Deaver was doing all the ethnographic stuff, or contemporary living peoples. And so they heard I had a degree, and then my former wife, Ann, she was now my wife at the time, she had graduated, so she joined the firm a few months later, and we focused primarily on what would be called ethnographic consultation. It was really an incredible experience. For about 3 years, I had the opportunity to work with elders in 12 different Western tribes. And
that was kind of just across the West.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'll give you an example. Like, let's say the Tongue River Reservoir.
Okay.
They're going to raise the water levels, which is what they were doing in the early 90s. And so what they do is archaeologists go out, they find archaeological sites that are probably going to be inundated or buried under the water, but then they also hire an ethnographer, myself, to work with the tribes to have the elders go out to define the sites in their own words. So an archaeologist would find a particular site. I would take elders from the Northern Cheyenne or the Crow in that instance, and we would go visit the sites they found, and they would tell me their interpretation of what the sites were. Yeah, it was really awesome.
Because it's different than like maybe with the archaeologists. Can you, just for those listening that aren't as familiar, like what would those differences be?
Between archaeology and cultural anthropology? Basically.
And like what the tribes would, how would the archaeologists describe it, and then how would the tribes describe it?
So many examples. It, again, one of those experiences where, as one of the elders, Bill Tauble, who I dearly loved, he would say, Kevin, I'm going to teach you this and that, but you're not rooted in the soil here. Maybe somebody from Ekalaka might express it the same. You grew up there, And so he said, we're like the tree. We're like a tree here, in terms of our culture. All the teaching I'm going to give you is going to be like a couple leaves on the tree. You're never going to understand what it's like to be rooted in our culture, to be rooted as a Northern Cheyenne. But you're going to get a glimpse, you know what I mean? And so I'll give you an example of, there's so many, Tongue River. So anyway, the archaeologists had found a stone ring, a circular ring. Hard to say what it was. It could have been a vision questing structure where somebody may have gone in the past and prayed and asked for, some kind of penance, hopefully, inquiring and hoping for a message from the spirit world to help them in their lives. Sometimes it was successful, sometimes it wasn't.
Yeah.
You'd go out for 3 nights and starve yourself and
see what happens.
And sometimes you wouldn't get, what you were hoping for, but a lot of times you would. Well, anyway, so there's this little stone ring on top of the hill, reservoir, way down below. And the archaeologists had defined it, as consisting of 27 rocks measuring, 4 feet, 6 feet or something like that. So it seemed too small for a tepee ring. It was a little large for kind of like a single person to have a vision questing structure where they would have like a little wall built up to protect them from the elements and stuff. Anyway, so the archaeologist defines it by the stones that are left behind and maybe, giving the best guess of what it might be. The elders I would go with would go there and use a prop right now. I can reach it without making a noise.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't.
Okay. Is there a prop?
Here, right
Okay.
Here's my prop. My prop is a beer. It's a top.
Beer top.
So no, it's not a beer top. So a coaster. So the coaster, let's say that's the archaeological definition of what the site is.
Yep.
The elders would take me there, and they would get up to that round circle of stones, and they would turn their back on it and look out in the landscape and go, "This is a good site." They're not looking at the rocks. The site was an indicator of something. People wouldn't camp or pray if the site had bad energy. So right away, the site has very positive spiritual characteristics. The second thing, you wouldn't be in a place, most likely, that had bad energy. So there was probably an area that was offering something to you, positive physical characteristics. So they turn their back on what the archaeological site would be and look out on the landscape and go, oh, yeah, the Tongue River is only about a third of a mile down that way. And over there is a sweetgrass gathering area over here. And then there's this plant that grows over there. This is a great site. So you can see how these two points of view don't line up, right? The archaeologist is,
here's the physical
27 rocks measuring 4 feet by 4 feet. And then the elders are saying, yeah, this is a great site. Now it's like 20 feet or 20 miles by 3 miles.
Yep.
And so that was my job, is just to record their experience and what they, what they saw, And so it was really cool. I mean, I saw I saw stuff. I'm not even a religious person.
Yeah.
But I saw things happen, unfold in front of me that I don't have an explanation for. that I would see happen, and the elders would go, "You see that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I see that. What do you see?" Because it was more important for me to record their perceptions of what they saw. So I would write in my field notes, the elders saw a cloud rise up with its arms spread out, blah, 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 things like that, So
Wow.
this was while we were visiting a site up in the Bighorn Mountains. So again, the perspective and how we define our boundaries was so different from the traditional elders to what I grew up with. Well, and especially in my archaeological world. And I think the two blend together very well. They need each other. We don't need to understand how
here's
people
what
live.
it looked like, but then here's like the explanation of why they would have been there.
Right. And there's always like what I love about history too is that, again, you can get multiple perspectives on the same thing. I just was out in western Montana this past weekend, but I was reminded of a story that Curly Bear Wagner told me, who's a Blackfeet elder. And he was talking about this story about Jim Bridger. And, loosely, it's like Jim Bridger was in the Three Forks area. He was attacked by the Blackfeet, him and, a couple other people. Okay. The other two were killed. Bridger was stripped naked, and he escaped. And he got away from so that's the classic story, is Jim Bridger runs for his life, and he saves himself, right? The Blackfeet story is we don't kill everybody. We make sure somebody's alive.
To go back and tell.
That's right. So, again. So
you don't come back
that's
with
right.
your fleet
That's
of
right.
others.
Or you grow a sense of fear about what you might be engaging, that type of thing. So, again, depending on your perspective.
Sides of the story.
That's right. You can, so if you're not getting the other side of the story, you're missing probably a lot of the story itself. And so that's also why I like that anthropological approach, because, especially in our world now, it's just so much information and misinformation coming to us. It's getting harder and harder. It's good to cite your sources.
Yep.
I just did an interview this morning up on the Rims. I try to make the point that if you're going to tell a particular crow story or something, it's really, really important that you have your source. That you say, Henry Old Coyote said this, Joe Medicine Crow said this, Mardell Plainfeather said this. Cite your references, because we live in a world now where anybody can be an expert on anything. So it's really more important. So
give it the context it needs.
So the whole cultural experience was really incredible. It was confusing to me at times too, because I was an outsider and people didn't know me. And, in the work I was doing, it was kind of expected to kind of expedite and speed things up because I was working on a deadline, kind of thing like that. And, and it was always miscommunications. I can remember go back to the Tongue River. I can remember asking about the Tongue River, and one of the elders, George Elkshoulder, seemed kind of aloof with me. He wasn't giving me any straight answers or anything. And then another elder said, well, did you offer him some kind of gifts? And then I asked, what would that be? And in this particular instance, I think it was like some tobacco and sweetgrass or something like that. So then I went back to
cultural differences.
That's right. Yeah. I wanted to be as respectful as possible, to anybody. And so I went back and offered that and asked Mr. Elkshoulder if he could think about this. And I think he then went to a group of people, maybe like society leaders, and said, do we talk to this guy? Do we work with him? And then like a couple more months goes by. It's democracy gone rampant, basically. You know what I mean? You want answers right away, but often the process is sometimes cumbersome and slower. But anyway, then a couple months later, I asked him the same questions, and pretty much he was guiding me to the sites. They had decided I was okay, that this information potentially could be helpful. Maybe even not in the present. Like a lot of the work I've done, like at Little Rockies, for example, with the the Altamont gold mine. Is that right? The mine, wanted a permit. I had all these interviews with all these elders. They were all concerned that their water was being poisoned in Mission Creek. The noise from the mine was impacting their ceremonies. The idea of doing a fast or a vision quest on top of the mountain, looking down at the mine, all of these factors. I honestly went in initially thinking that I was being helpful, right? But then the mine was permitted because what the elders or what the tribal representatives said was only one part of an environmental impact statement. So if the field biologist said, no, the elk won't be impacted. If the hydrologist said the water is going to be fine. If on and on. the archaeologist, whatever. And so that was mystifying to me, that the persons who had the most concern, who were living there, their voice was only one of several.
Mm-hmm.
But the positive part is that the work that we did in the 90s, after a period of 50 years, they become eligible for the National Register.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing interviews in the 1990s and they're talking about fasting in the 1950s, that changes the information, because a lot of the information I was recording was like, oh, in the 1920s, Coming Day did his fast here. Well, all they had was the oral history. So now things
and
are
now
being,
you have a site.
now things are being recorded, and hopefully maybe that voice in our culture today becomes more heard.
And you're
I suppose.
preserving it. And I think without having their piece of it too, you're just missing a huge part of the history of it.
And the tribal colleges, the tribal reps, they do outstanding work. They're more engaged now too.
Yeah.
In archaeology, they're more engaged in these kind of projects. This was in the early 90s when I was doing this work. It seemed kind of almost new and novel. I remember fielding calls from Alaska, from Hawaii, from all over the world, like saying,
"What you doing?
How do you do this National Environmental Protection Act, and how do you get cultural resources?" All the so, and that goes to kudos to Sherry Deaver and the Deavers at Ethnoscience. She was on the forefront. I just happened to walk into that situation. So, but like any contract work, after 3 years, all of a sudden it was gone.
And what'd you do?
I actually opened up my own business, which is weird because it was called Western Heritage Researchers. How's that for strange? Because, of course, I would end up working for the Western Heritage Center.
And was the Western Heritage Center?
Well, the Western Heritage Researchers, it was basically my wife and I writing scripts for film productions.
Oh, cool.
So like the history of Bannock, the film they used to show at Bannock, that was what we wrote.
Wow.
Things like that. So we were working with some of the elders for like the Blackfeet stories and stuff like that. So, but they were in like, very small documentary film production and stuff. So, and then I actually ended up volunteering at the Western Heritage Center like in 1993 or 4.
Okay.
Just actually almost for a year. Just to keep my feet kind of in the field. I had checked that museum out in like 92 or whatever. Loved what they were doing.
Was it the same location it is now?
Same location down on, Montana Avenue. Linda Moss and her staff at the time were doing some really cool, cutting-edge creative work and stuff, getting involved not just with the Billings in Yellowstone County, but also, working with the tribes and getting out and doing interviews with people from like Miles City and Glendive.
So more of a statewide
more southeastern, south central, I would say.
Yeah.
They did interviews with people from Harlow and did some amazing work. We're actually sharing those interviews even right now in an exhibit.
Cool.
Yeah, so they were filmed back in like 93 or 92. Red Killen out of Miles City, Augie Sabatka from Bad Route Creek, which is closer to Glendive. Incredible interviews. They did professionally shot interviews with these people at their own properties. Augie Sabatka is in his backyard at Bad Route Creek, which you'll see next time you head up to Glendive.
Okay.
Because there's an exit there. And he's in his backyard talking about, what it was like for women to be isolated on the prairie, how difficult it was. And how, one person, Lillian Stevenson, she talks about going to Wilsaw when she was like a 16-year-old, and she had lived in Missouri and had beautiful gardens and cars. And she got to Wilsaw. She's called it a jumping off point. There were no cars. The environment was far more difficult to live in. And, she survived and thrived. But at the end of her interview, Ron Bushnell, who's interviewing her, says, "Boy, I bet you're just proud to have lived in Montana." And at the end of the interview, she goes, "Oh, no, dear. If I had the money, I'd be long gone." And
Honesty.
This was like 60 years after.
Oh, no, dear.
Yeah, oh, no. And then she's laughing when she says it. But there's probably a little grain of truth in that. That notion,
absolutely.
So, here's the work that she was doing, Linda Moss and her crew in 92, 93, and we're still sharing it. That's really cool, too. Yeah, we have an exhibit on homesteading. So every one of those people we interviewed back in 92, 93, maybe 15 people or so, they're all gone. So
to have that on video
yeah,
and
it's
have
really
it
cool.
preserved is really
Yeah.
cool.
So I saw what they were doing. I volunteered for a year, and then I just couldn't take it anymore. I learned so much Billings history sitting at the front desk as a volunteer.
Yeah.
I think I read every book over the course of several weeks, over the year. And then I left, and that's, like I said, we were still doing our filmmaking and stuff like that. And then the job came up for a community historian, I think in like 96
Wow.
at the Western Heritage Center. So
Okay.
they already knew who I was.
Yeah.
I
You're a familiar
I
face.
had already helped him build a couple exhibit cases and stuff like that. So I had a clear advantage going in, and I've been there since, I think that's right, since 1996.
Wow.
Almost 30 years.
Yeah.
Frightening.
I know my brother was born that year, so.
Oh
yeah.
my God, It's hard to believe. Actually,
I know.
We have like Cecilia, and Lauren, Cecilia Gavinsky, our collections manager, and then Lauren Hunley, who's our community historian now. They're both in their 30s, So, Cecilia was like, oh my God, I came to the museum and I think I remember you. I was 7, I'm sure, I'm
like,
like, I
yep,
do remember. You were that squirrely little kid from, from what I can't remember. She's from one of the South Side schools. I forgot the Elysian or something like that,
Yeah.
So, so it's interesting.
So you started as the community.
I started as the community historian.
And what was that role like? Like, was that a new position? Did someone leave it and then it became vacant? And then what does that role entail?
Yeah. So I think, I don't know what the separation was, but there was a guy named Ron Bushnell who was more of an academic, scholarly kind of guy. And so I came in as community historian, and it just was a great fit for me. You know what I mean? Because, again, I have the background in archaeology, anthropology, love small-town Montana, love Montana history in general, and I always have had a fever for learning. And, initially I was really out of my I always have this thing I tell people all the time. I've made this up, by the way. There's what I
Those
call
are my favorite things.
What I call the 3-year plan.
Okay.
So when you start a new job, first year is survival.
It is.
Second year is competency. Third year, you start being a shining star. I made this up.
No, I think I'm like going through mine. I'm like, oh yeah, that's so legit.
Yeah, I know. And
you're
people,
like,
right?
What is this? Yes,
people who hear it are
surviving.
like, oh, good, because you're already you're already in a panic in the third week. So if you phrase things like that, but in my first year as a community historian, there were already community historians here. John Willard, of course, Joyce Jensen, who we still work with today. So it was always awkward for me to be introduced as the community historian. I was like a novice, really. I mean, I knew enough to be dangerous, I suppose, but I always recognized those people that had been doing it for years as really being, I just had the title, And I think after about a year or so, I started feeling more comfortable in that idea. The second year, I maybe became more competent.
Like, okay, kind of get it.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing.
And all of a sudden, maybe the third or fourth year now, some of those community historians are like, hey, what do you know about, this
He
or
does
that?
know what he's doing. I can ask questions now.
So, because that was my existence, was building exhibit displays, helping with the archives. I had to learn collections management, which I had actually done in northern Arizona too, at Flagstaff. Walking tour programs, presentations. I've always been comfortable in front of a crowd.
And you're great in front of a crowd.
Yeah, and I still get anxious, but I think that's a healthy thing, to be a little anxious. I think if you're not anxious, you become a little too flippant. Like I remember one time I got in front of a group of people, and I was like so casual. I knew the information so well. I almost felt like I had a martini in my hand, like I was doing a gig, and that's dangerous too. So I think you need that anxiety to help you take seriously what you're doing. So and like obviously I have no, I don't stress over, doing programs. I mean, I've had so much fun, even in the last year as the museum director now. It's like, I think I did the United Steelworkers, followed by the Montana Stock Growers, followed by the Moth Conference, Moth, M-O-T-H, back to back to back. You change for your audience. What are their interests? So, it's
why
not
is the group gathering? Like,
that's right.
what's relevant to them?
Yeah, you alter depending on what your audience you hope they want out of the program and stuff. So
how long were you the community historian putting together exhibits in that role?
I quite a while, because I know, there was a period where I was interim director early on.
Yeah.
Like maybe in my 6th year or so at the museum, I'd really grown comfortable with community historian. We were doing some really fun stuff. Linda Moss was always really good about kind of pushing the envelope, getting really creative, doing some crazy stuff. And so I really enjoyed that. But I was working a lot too. I was working like 50, 60 hours a week for years. And then when she left, I became interim director for about 2 years. Wow, that was disastrous, because they didn't replace the community historian.
Because you were just, and
I was
it was
already
an
doing
interim
my 50, 60 hours a week.
Plus.
Now I'm going to be the director. So after 2 years, I was completely burned out. And they offered the position to me. I was like, oh, God, no, I can't do it, And so Julie Dial stepped in. She was really good at coordinating and very businesslike, managed people's hours better. So I wasn't doing the crazy, crap about going out and working too much.
You had a little more of a social, your own personal life.
So then I think I was deputy director for a while. I think it was just the title. You had small business with 6 or 8 people. Everybody gets a position kind of like that. And then I was a community historian again for another maybe 10 years or so.
Wow.
I think I've been the director of the museum for 7 years.
And do you like it now? After you did,
it.
Now that it wasn't interim, that it's
right, because we've had great community historians. So Elizabeth de Grenier stepped in. She took the position over. She was amazing. Lauren Huntley is amazingly skilled, great at building exhibits and stuff like that. Each person brings their own different skill sets too. So the position changes according to who they are and stuff like that. So I still get out quite a bit.
Yeah.
I do a lot of programs. Yeah. I don't want to give that up, because I really do.
And you're good at it.
I do like it too.
Yeah.
I really enjoy getting out and getting people excited about Montana history and the built environment and, surprises. I love even people who are on our walking tour and they're like, I never knew that.
I had no idea.
Like something really simple like Division Street.
Yeah, I remember you gave a presentation at a chamber thing that I was at, and we were at the mayor's cabin in Red Lodge.
Oh, yeah.
And I just remember certain things that I learned in that I'm like, well, I'm not from Billings, but you were talking about it. I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah, why we have a railroad track through the middle of downtown, Division Street being the dividing point between the original railroad plat. I just think it's so fascinating. Somebody asked me years ago what I do. The pat answer is to say, what do you do in your day to day? But I think that what we do at the museum is make people feel more at home. Very simple idea, almost cliched. But think about the chamber, I always felt, is a very comparable parallel. We take people, give them the maps of the past to get them to the present. You get to know your town better. And I think you feel more at home.
Yeah, because you get why. And I think when we had coffee with Steve, you were talking about, and we'll have to do a completely different episode on Billings history, but why the refineries are where they're at.
Right.
There's strategy when the town was being built of why things are where they're at and where they're located. And I think as a resident, then knowing that it makes sense, when people are asking about it, or oh, well, why is a refinery right there? And it's well, there's a reason. It didn't just get placed there randomly, and your town was built upon different things and different people that really paved the way for it to be what it is today.
Yeah, and that's, I think it's
so I love that.
Basic for humans. I mean,
it's with a family too. You're tied to your ancestry of where you came from, whether you lived there and grew up there, and then where your grandparents, great grandparents, etc. came from, and the path they laid for you to get to where you are.
Yeah, I think like I said, the chamber does something similar. The chamber will give you the map of the present to try to entice you to live into the future. So it's a nice little balancing act, between the past, the present, and the future. And another thing about museum business in general, I heard this years ago on National Public Radio, loved it. A person was talking about human instincts. Again, I love the natural world, but they were saying, humans have, you can think of shelter and, need for love and things like that. Those are basic human instincts, that help us to survive.
Totally.
But the person on the radio said storytelling and collecting are both human instincts. And I thought, wow, that explains why we have museums.
Yeah.
Think about it. I mean, squirrels collect nuts for their because they.
But I think we have to, otherwise we'll just repeat our same
Right,
bad things
right.
if we don't
Well,
learn
that's true.
from it.
But I mean, even like collecting, trivial things. We are instinctually driven.
That's interesting.
To look at how many. I always laugh at all of these. What are they? The areas that they have. My brain's lapsing right now, but the idea of where they have all the areas where you put all your stuff.
Yeah, like storage
units.
rooms.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, storage units.
Yeah, like storage units.
For
Look at all
people's
the
stuff.
It's incredible how much we collect. It's weird because we're only here for a short time too. So how much can your grandkids take?
Right, and I think depending on what era, I had family in depression. My grandparents' depression era, so it's like I remember, and they passed away when I was really young. But growing up, like. It's now kind of like a funny joke in the family, but it's like they save sour cream containers, butter containers, because they grew up in a time where there was nothing.
Right.
And so I just think those things shape us too, of like what generation you kind of grow up in based on like what was going on in the world of what kinds of things you keep.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, it is funny how you're right. Stresses will make you collect a little more. In times that are
hoarding
good,
cash, etc.
Yeah, in times of good. I mean, if you look at the shelves in my house, I'm like, it's weird. It's like little bits of fossils and maybe some Dutch artifacts because of my ancestry.
Yeah.
I have books because I like to read. You can kind of like
what people like.
Yeah, figure out what people like by the fact that we have this instinct to collect. And of course, the other half of that is the storytelling. I always remember the show Northern Exposure.
Okay, I don't think I've seen it.
It was like kind of set in like Alaska or something, and it was a unusual cast of character. And it had one guy who was a native guy. His name was Ed, and he said, we all used to sit around, the fire and tell stories, and that's how we learn. That's how we did our storytelling. And he goes, now we just watch TV. TV has become our fireplace, and it's fascinating that we have these mechanisms to do storytelling.
We always say the kitchen table is ours.
Right, or to create stories. Yeah, actually, it was funny because Anne's family, when we were married, I was always like, wow. We'd hang out at our kitchen table for like 3 days. I'm like, when are we going to go outside?
I know. My dad was like, is like, why are we always at the kitchen table when there's people over? And it's like, I guess that's just where we all gather to chat, catch up.
That's what we do, right? I mean, so you can see like how that ties into my thinking, in terms of, and so, I've been the director for 7 years. And one thing I really did, I felt like I needed a change. I was kind of getting antsy.
Yeah, like what's next?
I've been doing the same thing for 20 years or whatever for the most part. And it's odd because I really like QuickBooks. And I like
interesting.
I like accounting. Okay. Yeah, I like numbers. I like Excel databases. People who know me, they can go on my phone right now and I have an Excel database of my vacations.
Oh, I love that.
Like where I'm going to be, what date, all of those things because I have to organize my life. Because it seems like we're never caught up at the museum. We're always working on projects and stuff. Everybody's super busy. We don't get, we're not killing it in terms of making money, and things like that. We have to be really joyful in what we do. But when I became director, it was, it changed, but I actually enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. People always say, I've never worked a day in my life. I've heard. I actually almost used to argue that with my early days as a community historian. Now I say I love my work about 70% of the time. I think that's probably more realistic.
Oh yeah, there's always those things you don't like. So I will be doing our audience a disservice if you don't talk a little bit about what do you guys do at what programming do you guys have at the Western Heritage Center?
Okay, in a summary, we have 6 staff. So we build exhibits, for in-house.
And tell a little bit too about your building.
Okay. Oh yeah. We're in the Parmley Billings Memorial Library building, which is that beautiful castle-like structure on Montana Avenue. It was the public library from 1901 to the mid to late 60s. Wow. And then in 1969, a local architect basically said, we've got to save that building.
Yeah.
And so
which thank God for those people.
Right. And thank God, too, for the Yellowstone County taxpayers, because early on in 1971, we got a mill. And so we've been really fortunate to have the support of the county since 1971. Matter of fact, we still get the majority of the mill levy for museums in the county. I think it's like 25%, 25%, and then the Huntley Project gets about 10. But so we're really that's a huge thing.
Oh, totally.
Because then our salaries are covered in some way. So we get
you
to
do great work and have good people.
Absolutely, we get to do all these great things. Like I said, building exhibits in house. But most people we reach are actually outside the museum because of our public program. And that was set in stone in 1971 when they founded the museum. They said Vern Drake and his group basically said in 71, what we're going to focus on is changing displays, outreach programming, and using new technologies. Now, Vern told me personally, he was thinking about televisions. Like we could have a TV in an exhibit, outreach.
Funny how life
outreach is what it sounds like.
Yep.
Getting out into the schools, doing public programs, and we've taken that a whole different direction in the last 10 years. And then, of course, changing displays. If you think about museums pre-1971, it's more of the little dust, duster, feather duster, or whatever, and then you would clean stuff, and then, it wouldn't
it's
change.
Still there.
So that was what happened to us in the 70s. It was a transitional where we had some more long-term displays, but then our board was like, no, we need to change. And so
draw new people in.
That's right. We change every year, and hopefully to draw new people who want to come back too. But the outreach is really what I love too, because it's like getting out, going to people, whether it's we love Morning Star Senior Center. They're just so great out there. I love the Southside Senior Center. All of the senior centers we do programs for. Cool. Like I mentioned earlier, the United Steelworkers, conferences, helping the chamber with their tours, their familiarization tours, to sell that, that base of the history and stuff like that. So, and in addition to all of that outreach, including our walking tours, which we have one on this Friday, we do downtown walking tours, but we also have the largest collection of traveling exhibits of any museum in the state now. Wow. And some of them are pretty easy. They're just pop-up displays. You mentioned Ekalaka, the Carter County Museum. They may have had the Ethel Hayes.
Yeah, I think they did it in a schoolhouse.
The cartoonist from Billings.
Yes. Now thinking, I'm like, I have pictures of it, and that's what it was.
Yeah, so we find these stories, all of us on staff, whether it's Lauren or Cecilia and I, we all have our own kind of set of passions, So, for example, Cecilia loves bees, honeybees. Oh, cool. So she's doing programs on honeybees and agriculture. She's done an exhibit on honeybees and agriculture. Lauren loves firefighting and police. So we've done exhibits on firefighting. We have an exhibit up right now called Criminal Behavior, where we worked with the Billings Police Department. Me, I like characters. I like, like Hazel Hunkins, the suffragist from Billings. I love these stand tall local characters that make an impact, not just locally, but nationally. Hazel Hunkins is a suffragist. Ethel Hayes is a syndicated cartoonist. Robert Bob Cobb of the Cobb salad fame. Joseph Oliver Eady of Eady's Ice Cream and Rocky Road Ice Cream. Things like that. It's just like, isn't it fun to know in your community that you have all these thriving personalities who, were supported, sometimes not supported. They did stuff that people were frowning upon, or maybe they had to go somewhere else, like a Bob Cobb had to go to Hollywood and open up, work at the Brown Derby restaurant in Hollywood. That's how he made his Cobb salad. Or Joseph Oliver Eady left Billings and Broadway Avenue to go to Oakland to partner with, I think it's Dryard. And great Rocky Road ice cream.
Oh, yeah. Okay, the ice cream brand,
So the people are rooted here, but there are stories, and we can have that.
And it
hometown.
Comes back here.
That's right.
Here.
Yeah, I always thought it would be fundraiser would be to have like a Cobb salad with Rocky Road ice cream.
I would eat it.
And then lay claim to those people, So
fun.
And we still have all of these stories that we're developing even today, I was just at a person's house in Hamilton this last weekend, and there was a giant Harry Koyama painting in his house. And Harry, of course, still has a studio on Montana Avenue, has an amazing family history and story, his connection with Ben Steele, prisoner of war. So That's where I lean when I go for stories, and of course, Lauren actually Hunley has her history crush on Ethel Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
So she created the whole Ethel Hayes,
Cool.
really made that a beautiful story. And so, we get this opportunity to find kind of fun stories that we hope people will appreciate. Sometimes it's just a matter of, like, for example, the Billings Gazette did all those wonderful interviews. Daryl Ehrlich did all these great interviews with Vietnam vets, maybe more than 10 years ago. We just took all of that and turned it into a traveling pop-up display.
Cool.
Yeah, so you can still,
That's really special.
it's just a different format to reach different people. Of course, we now do online exhibits. So we just had the American Indian Boarding School exhibit here in the spring, which was a national traveling show. But Lauren organized like an educational outreach with one of our board members to have students present art on that tough topic. And that's now an online
I'll have to check that out.
exhibit also. Yeah. So, again, you can't expect everybody to just walk through your front door.
No.
That's
you got to draw them in.
That's not the model anymore.
Meet them where they're at.
That's right. You have to get out. You have to go. You have to explore. And it just makes your job that much more fun. And I've been lucky. You and I have talked about, Ekalaka. I was on the Southeast Montana Tourism Board. It allows you the opportunity to get to make friends with people from Glendive and Terry and, Ekalaka.
And they have really rich histories that I think are like special to the families that are there, like people that have grown up there. Like there's just unique histories in those smaller towns in Montana.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just at, I was out in Western Montana this last weekend and, it was Smelter Man's Day. An anaconda,
which is a big deal.
Yes,
I'm
it's a
sure.
big deal. We got a tour of the big stack,
Yep.
which they only do during these special days. So,
which is like a unique experience.
Yeah, and there's just these towns are really, really cool. So one of our jobs is over the years to do oral histories. So we've been able to do oral histories with people like Bill Jones up at 2DOT and folks in Miles City, as I mentioned. Lauren's doing an amazing project right now with American Disabilities Act.
Oh, wow.
Just interviewing people, who are hard of hearing or blind, or have a physical limitation, and she's doing interviews about what's their experience like growing up in Montana. How is it different? That would be interesting. Yeah, so next year we're going to have a year-long exhibit on the American Disabilities Act using the voices of Montanans who understand.
Or who are deaf with the school in Great Falls.
That's right. Yeah. Or somebody, I know one of the stories was a woman who was a high school student, I believe in Sydney. And, she was put in with the special needs kids and she just had a physical ailment. So she didn't really fit in with the special needs kid. And then, of course, then she didn't fit in with the student body. And she said it was the loneliest time of her life.
And it's so sad.
Yeah, it is sad.
Because you're you just want, they're like a great person. You just want them to feel like part of it.
Right. So, here's an opportunity for, Lauren's passion to follow through with this story, to not only just give the facts about the American Disabilities Act, but also, obviously, to share the voices of people in Montana who are willing to be that gracious. So.
Yeah, I really like that. Well, Kevin, it's been such a delight. We have to have you back on to talk about the Billings history, but we like to end each episode with a few, we call them rapid fire questions. But before I do that, we're going to hear a message from a sponsor. Thank you to Big Sky Economic Development for supporting the Vault at 201 North Broadway. Big Sky Economic Development is the community's economic development organization. BSED's mission is to sustain and grow our region's vibrant economy and outstanding quality of life by providing leadership and resources for business creation, expansion, retention, new business recruitment, workforce development, and community development. Learn more and connect with BSED at bigskyeconomicdevelopment.org. Here's my first question for you from our rapid fire. What's some of the best advice you've ever received or read about?
Some of the best advice I've ever received or heard about. Be kind.
I like that.
You don't always know what's going on with people, so just be kind.
I really like that. What's one of the favorite, and it could be a few things, but some of the favorite parts of your job that you enjoy?
I'd be a total geek if I said QuickBooks, but I really do like QuickBooks.
Good to know. Fun fact.
No, actually, I would say, going out, giving presentations, meeting people, getting that opportunity to go places that to me are really exotic, like Weibo or Ekalaka. It's really cool. So
that's fun. That's really great. And my last one is for anyone that's listening that's maybe new to Billings or thinking about visiting Billings, what do you suggest as a must-try, must-do in our city?
Well, it's funny because I did an interview with Jeff, from the zoo, and
Jeff, the nature guy.
I have a lot of friends who come here, so I almost feel like a tour guide a lot of times. So people, my kids even say, "Oh, he just went into his history voice."
Here we go.
So obviously, the zoo is and it's a beautiful zoo, and they do great care of the animals and stuff like that. So obviously the Yellowstone Art Museum has a lot of changing. The Yellowstone County Museum, the Moss Mansion, on and on. For me personally, also beyond that, Yellowstone National Park has always been a target. Of course, from the beginnings for me in 1980 when I came here, and then just exploring. Like going and staying in Sheridan, Wyoming for 2 nights, or
that's a cute
staying
town.
in Miles City for 2 nights and just poke around, take your time, sleep in, then go to the store, coffee at 10 o'clock, those types of experiences, you're not going to know what it like to live in those towns, but you might get like what Mr. Bill Tallwell told me, a glimpse. You know what I mean? Maybe you can catch a rhythm after 3 or 4 nights or whatever. I don't know.
I bet you could. Yeah.
You might, maybe.
You could feel for the town, what the people are like.
Yeah, and people are friendly. I walked into Weibo to do interviews, and I thought, I'm an outsider. Not only I'm from Billings, but I'm originally from New Jersey, and I never felt, like I was being judged. And the people were gracious.
They're happy to welcome you to their town.
Yeah, they shared their history. We have that commonality, so they know that. So that helps.
That's special. Okay, well, Kevin, where can people get connected and learn more about the Western Heritage Center? Like website, social media?
Yeah,
where can they find you?
We have the website. So it's, a Yellowstone Western Heritage Center. So you do Western Heritage Center, you'll find us on the website, and that's where our updated calendars are on exhibits and stuff. We have a Facebook presence, which actually we use quite a bit.
Yeah.
Instagram, which Cecilia and Lauren do the Instagram. Maybe Danette does it. Heather, I don't know, but
somebody's doing it.
Somebody's doing it. I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of ways. Obviously, nowadays, you just do a search for Western Heritage Center, Billings, Montana. Hopefully, something good shows up.
Totally,
right?
And you can come do programs at people's offices or schools.
We've done. I just did for one of the investing groups. I just did a private walking tour of downtown.
Yeah.
We'll go anywhere. We'll bring exhibits. We have low cost exhibits. So our exhibits have been at the airport. One was up in Chinook. Maybe it's still there. Sydney. All over So we work with a lot of our museum partners and local communities, like for the libraries, to make sure if they want to supplement the great work they're doing, they can add this little element with one of our exhibits. So
it's a good reason to draw the locals back in.
So. That's right, yes. So we're all in this together.
Yeah, well, thank you. This has been great to have you.
You bet, thank you. So.
We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Make sure you are subscribed to The Vault at 201 North Broadway, wherever you podcast, including YouTube.
Connect with us on Facebook at The Vault at 201 North Broadway and Instagram at TheVault_201.
Don't forget to visit us at thevault@201.com and subscribe to our newsletter.
We will see you next time.
Bye.